I hadn't slept past 7 FM. Did I end 6 straight workdays? MY996 design schedule ate every spare minute of my week, and Sunday morning was my only shot at unbroken rest. MY phone blared nonstop at 6:04 a.m. Shrill enough to jolt me straight out of a half-formed dream about weekend grocery runs. I fumbled for the device under my pillow, throat thick with sleep, and snapped the call open without checking the number. Took you long enough to pick up, you deadbeat? A woman's sharp, shrill voice blasted through the speaker. No greeting, no pause to let me speak. I blinked hard, squinting at the unfamiliar 10-digit number glowing on my screen. Excuse me? Who are you? You woke me up at 6 in the morning. My tone came out sharper than I intended, weeks of overtime frustration bubbling to the surface before I could reel it back. Doesn't matter who I am, I just dropped $2,000 into your phone number by mistake. I meant to type the last digit 8, hit 9 instead, and I was half asleep topping up $200, double tap the 0 button, and suddenly it's 20,000. You're gonna wire that cash back to me right now. The fog of sleep cleared instantly. I sat bolt upright on my sofa bed, one hand rubbing my bleary eyes. $20,000? You put 20 grand on a phone bill. Quit acting like you didn't get it. I saw the confirmation text pop up before I realized I messed up the digits. That money's mine, so transfer it over immediately. Her voice climbed higher, tight with impatience. I glanced at my phone plan dashboard pulled up on my home tablet the night before, my cheap $8 monthly maintenance plan, the bare-bones service I kept only to hold on to my primary cell number. I did quick mental math, counting the months that balance would cover. 208 years of service. I wasn't planning to live 2 more centuries, and my monthly salary barely hit 8,000 USD before rent and bills. There was no logical scenario where I'd keep 20,000 trapped in a phone account indefinitely. Look, I don't want to hold on to your money, but you don't need to send me cash directly. Call your mobile carrier's customer support line, pull up your payment transaction receipt, and they can reverse the full deposit straight back to your original payment card. It's standard protocol for accidental large top-ups. I kept my voice even, walking her through the standard refund process I'd read about on my carrier's help page months prior. She exploded the second I finished talking. Why the hell do I need to jump through all those hoops? The money's sitting in your account now. You just send it to my bank account, and we're both done with this garbage. You're trying to hoard my cash, aren't you? I'll call the cops. 20,000 is enough to press felony theft charges against you. You'll spend years locked up over this. I let out a bitter, exhausted laugh. She clearly Googled a single line of legal text and thought she understood the entire statute on unjust enrichment. The deposit was entirely her own error. I hadn't tricked her, requested the funds, or hidden the balance once notified. There was zero grounds for a theft case against me. Go ahead and file a police report if that makes you feel better. I've told you the proper resolution route, and I'm not wiring personal cash to a stranger over a misplaced phone payment. I'm hanging up now. I cut the call without waiting for her reply, dragged my finger across the screen to block her number, and flopped back under my blanket to try salvaging my sleep. I assumed that would be the end of the nonsense. 6 hours later, I woke to my screen flooded with 99 missed calls and dozens of unread text messages, every single one filled with vicious, vulgar insults targeting my character and family. A new unknown number dialed me before I could even scroll through the abuse, and this time a man's gravelly, aggressive voice filled my ear the second I accepted. You think blocking my wife's number gets you out of this? We've been calling you nonstop since dawn, and you've been ignoring every single attempt to reach out. You want to play stupid? I'll drop that same 20 grand to hire someone to beat your skull in before sundown. My weekend peace vanished completely. I'd lived alone in this city for 3 years, never told my family about the constant overtime stress so they wouldn't worry, and I'd never gotten into a single violent conflict my entire adult life. I forced myself to breathe slow, steady breaths, refusing to match his rage. I already explained this to your wife, and my white plan only costs $8 a month. That 20,000 will sit unused in my account for 200 years. The carrier refunds accidental overpayments directly back to your card. All you need is your ID and payment receipt at a local store. The process takes 7 business days max. It's not a lifetime wait. He scoffed loud enough to crackle over the line, dismissive of every word I said. 7 days is way too long, and I need that money back today, not next week. You don't get to make me wait because you're too lazy to send a bank transfer. That balance is yours now, so it's your responsibility to hand it over to me. If you refuse, I'm showing up at your address and breaking every bone in your body. The threat landed cold in my chest, sharp enough to make my hands shake. I'd spent the whole week pulling 12-hour shifts at the design firm, and my one free day was being ruined by 2 strangers refusing to take accountability for their own typing mistake. I snapped back without filtering my frustration. 7 days is too slow for you, but you expect me to absorb $20,000 of your error? That's not how responsibility works. Either follow the carrier's refund steps, or I'll send you $8 every single month until the balance runs out. Your kids and grandkids can collect the rest after you're gone. I slammed the call down, ripped the SIM card out of my secondary backup phone, and tossed it into my desk drawer to cut off all further incoming harassment. I ordered takeout on my main line, pulled up a comedy variety show on my tablet, and tried to push the entire terrible morning out of my mind. I cleaned my apartment, folded laundry, sketched a few unused design drafts for work, and lost track of time until early evening rolled around. I grabbed my keys to head to the neighborhood grocery store for dinner ingredients when my primary phone buzzed with an incoming call tagged with local police dispatch. My stomach sank as I swiped to answer. Ms. Zhang Ran, this is Officer Hale from Westside Community Precinct. A couple named Zhang Hongguang and Zhao Guifang filed a formal fraud report against you, alleging you stole 20,000 USD from them via an accidental phone top-up. We're requesting you come down to the station immediately to give your statement. I pinched the bridge of my nose, weariness weighing heavy on my shoulders, the grocery run, the quiet homemade dinner I'd been looking forward to. All of it was gone. I pulled on my jacket, hailed a cab to the police station 20 minutes from my apartment, and stepped through the station front doors 30 minutes after the call. Before I could even introduce myself to the desk sergeant, Zhang Hongguang and Zhao Guifang bolted off the waiting bench, screaming insults loud enough for every officer in the room to turn their heads. "You're the thief who's holding our money hostage. Officer, lock her up right now. She's a con artist who preys on hardworking, regular folks." Zhao Guifang pointed a trembling finger straight at my face, her voice shrill with manufactured outrage. Zhang Hongguang stepped beside her, jaw tight, glaring at the uniformed officers. "Don't let her looks fool you, sir. She's manipulating the system to keep our life savings. This is clear illegal possession of private funds, full-on fraud." A uniformed sergeant stepped between us, holding a hand up to silence the couple, his tone firm and unamused. "This is a police station, not your personal argument space. If you continue disrupting the premises with verbal harassment, I'll place both of you in holding for disorderly conduct." The pair quieted down, bitter resentment still etched across their faces, and the sergeant guided me to a private interview room to walk through the full timeline of events. I laid out every detail chronologically. The 6 a.m. wake-up call, their refusal to contact the carrier for a standard refund, the death threats over the phone, the flood of hateful text messages, and my repeated offers to cooperate with any official refund process through the mobile company. The sergeant turned to the couple seated across the table, his brow creased in obvious disbelief. "This is your definition of fraud? You miskeyed a phone number and overpaid your own bill, ignored the victim's instructions to reverse the charge through customer service, and filed a theft report when she wouldn't hand you untraceable cash? The carrier's refund process exists specifically for mistakes like this. Your grievance is with the phone company's 7A processing window, not this woman." Zhao Guifang crossed her arms, unyielding, doubling down on her argument. "It's easier for her to just wire the money back to us. Why should we waste hours driving to a store and waiting a week when she's got the balance sitting in her account? She's clearly refusing on purpose to steal our cash. Easier for you means dumping the full burden of your mistake onto a stranger who had zero part in this error." The sergeant shook his head, leaning back in his chair. "She's on an $8 monthly plan with 20,000 trapped in her account. Any reasonable person would immediately suspect a money laundering scheme with that kind of unprompted deposit, not jump to hand over thousands in cash to random strangers threatening violence." Zhao Guifang slammed her palm on the table, eyes blazing with anger. "So are you sending the money back to us or not?" I leaned forward, keeping my tone calm and unyielding, no trace of malice in my voice. "I will fully cooperate with any formal refund request the mobile carrier sends over. I can sign paperwork, verify my account, take any calls their team schedules, whatever they need to process the reversal, but I will not send personal bank transfers to you directly. I refuse to take liability for your typing error." Zhang Hongguang's expression turned cold, his gaze hard and threatening as he stared me down. "You'll regret this choice before the day ends. Mark my words." I twisted toward the sergeant, gesturing at the man beside me. "That's a direct verbal threat of harm. Can that be documented in my official statement?" The sergeant shot Zhang Hongguang a sharp warning stare. "Zhang Hongguang, one more threatening remark toward the civilian, and I'm detaining you for criminal intimidation immediately." Zhang Hongguang's jaw tightened, but he swallowed whatever retort he'd been ready to spit out. He grabbed Zhao Guifang's wrist, stood from the table, and announced they were withdrawing their police report entirely. As they reached the station doorway, Zhao Guifang muttered loud enough for every officer to hear that local law enforcement was useless and biased against working-class people, leaving every uniformed staff member in the room stiff with frustration. I wrapped up my formal statement with the sergeant, thanked him for hearing me out, and stepped outside the station doors as night fell, the clock ticking past 9 p.m. I stopped at a neighborhood noodle shop for a late dinner, the weight of the day's harassment clinging to my shoulders. On the walk back to my apartment complex after eating, I kept catching the faint sensation of someone trailing a few steps behind me, but every time I spun around to check, the sidewalk stood empty. I chalked it up to stress-induced paranoia, leftover anxiety from hours of threats and police station conflict, and headed straight for the elevator to my unit, without stopping for my usual evening jog around the complex. I collapsed onto my living room sofa the second I unlocked my front door, ready to shut out the world and decompress, when loud, insistent knocking echoed through the hallway outside my apartment. Assuming it was building maintenance checking a plumbing issue reported by a neighbor earlier that afternoon, I twisted the deadbolt and pulled the door open without hesitation. Zhang Hongguang lunged forward the second the gap widened, one hand shooting out to clamp tight around my throat, cutting off my breath mid-gasp. His face was inches from mine, red with unbridled rage. "Last chance to send that 20 grand to my bank account. Don't make me hurt you worse than I already planned to." Pain exploded across my cheek the second Zhao Guifang's palm connected with my skin. I stumbled backward into my entryway, fingers flying up to cut my stinging jaw, hot tears burning the corners of my eyes from shock and agony. I'd never been physically assaulted in my life, and the raw, unprovoked violence sent a wave of cold panic racing through my bloodstream. "This is your fault for refusing to hand over our money," Zhao Guifang snarled, stepping over the threshold of my apartment like she owned the space, uninvited and aggressive. "We wouldn't have to lay a hand on you if you'd just done the simple, decent thing and wired the cash back hours ago." Zhang Hongguang released my throat, stepping forward to block my path to the kitchen counter where I'd left my phone. He pulled out his personal cell phone, flipping the screen to display a bank QR code held inches from my face. "Scan this right now, transfer every cent of that 20,000, or we start adding daily interest, $100 extra every day you hold onto our funds. Miss a single payment and we'll break both your legs." I shook my head hard, backing further into my living room, my voice shaky, but firm despite the fear coiling tight in my chest. "That's extortion. You're the ones who messed up the payment. You threatened me all day. You just hit me in my own home, but I'm calling the police and an ambulance right now." I stretched my arm behind me, fumbling to grab my phone off the sofa cushion, but Zhang Hongwang saw the movement instantly. He snarled, spun around, and snatched the ceramic flower pot from the metal railing outside my door, lifting it high above his shoulder. Before I could scream or step out of range, he swung the heavy pot full of soil straight into the center of my forehead. Ceramic shattered on impact. Dirt and broken shards sprang across my entryway carpet. A blinding burst of white pain burst behind my eyes, warm thick blood pouring down my face to blur my vision completely. I swayed unsteadily on my feet, every muscle in my body going weak, and crumpled toward the floor as neighbors burst out of their units after hearing the crash and my pained cry. A man from the unit directly across the hall, Mr. Liu, who'd lived beside me for 3 years, barreled forward with several other male residents, tackling Zhang Hongwang to the hallway floor and pinning his arms behind his back to stop him from striking me again. His teenage daughter's security camera, mounted above their front door to watch the hallway, captured every second of the assault on continuous cloud storage, a detail I wouldn't learn until days later. Call 911 immediately, and get an ambulance over here. This is a vicious assault with a weapon, Mr. Liu shouted to the other neighbors, his gaze darting down to my blood-covered face as I slumped against the wall, barely conscious. Zhao Guifang screamed over the crowd, attempting to push past the neighbors restraining her husband, screaming wild accusations to paint me as the villain. This woman stole our life savings. We only came to retrieve our own money. She's the one who caused all this trouble. One of the younger neighbors, Shun, who'd regularly chatted with me while walking our dogs each evening, stepped between her and my collapsing body, his tone sharp with disbelief. We've lived next to Ran for years. She's quiet, kind, helps everyone in the building with graphic design work for free. There's zero chance she'd steal thousands of dollars from strangers over a phone bill. Even if there was a payment mix-up, you don't break into someone's apartment and attack them over it. Zhao Guifang's temper spiraled further, her words devolving into cruel, baseless slander to turn the crowd against me. You're all defending her because you're sleeping with her, aren't you? This woman's nothing but a reckless floozy who manipulates every man in this complex to side with her. The insult hit me while my head throbbed violently, blood dripping into my eyes to cloud my sight. I grabbed Chen's wrist weakly, my voice barely audible over the chaos of the hallway argument. Please finish calling emergency services. I can't stay awake much longer. Darkness swallowed my vision mid-sentence, and I blacked out entirely before the paramedics arrived. The next sensation I registered was harsh fluorescent hospital lighting burning my retinas, a sharp, throbbing pain splitting my forehead wide open, and a nurse adjusting and foreline taped to my forearm. I blinked slowly, taking in the sterile hospital room around me, a bandage wrapped thick around my head covering the laceration from the flower pot strike. A doctor stepped beside my hospital bed the second my eyes fluttered open, flipping through a clipboard of my injury scans. You sustained a moderate traumatic brain concussion alongside a deep forehead laceration that required 8 surgical stitches to close. No permanent skull fractures, but you need complete bed rest for a minimum of 2 weeks to avoid worsening the brain injury. No screens, no heavy stress, minimal conversation for the next 48 hours. I nodded weakly, my hand drifting up to touch the bandage, flinching at the dull ache radiating outward from the wound. I pulled my phone off the bedside tray and dialed my work supervisor, my voice rough and cracked from dehydration and shock. Hey Chi, I got attacked in my apartment last night, had laceration and concussion. I'm admitted in the hospital right now. I'll need to request medical leave for at least 2 weeks. I'll catch up on all delayed design projects once I'm cleared to work again. My supervisor expressed immediate concern, promising to adjust my client deadlines and reassign urgent drafts to other team members temporarily. A handful of my coworkers arrived at the ward an hour later with bouquets of flowers, offering emotional support and covering my pending workload while I recovered. One colleague muttered a quiet remark about my injury derailing office progress under his breath once he thought I couldn't hear, a bitter reminder of how disposable entry-level design staff felt at our high-pressure firm, but I brushed it off without comment. My medical bills were far more urgent than office gossip. Once my coworkers left, I dialed the responding police officer's direct line to ask about the legal repercussions of the assault. The officer's answer crushed my faint hope of quick financial compensation for hospital fees. Zhang Hongwang and Zhao Guifang have almost zero assets between them. That 20,000 accidental phone deposit was their entire household emergency fund. All your emergency room, imaging, and hospital stay costs will need to come out of your personal savings up front. You can file a civil damages lawsuit after the criminal case concludes to recoup every dollar you spent on medical care, but the criminal charges against them are solid. Zhang Hongwang's assault with a blunt object qualifies as felony aggravated battery resulting in bodily harm, a charge that carries mandatory jail time if convicted. I hung up the call and stared at my bank account balance on my phone screen, barely $22,000 total in savings after 3 years of rent and living expenses. The hospital bills alone threatened to wipe out nearly all my emergency funds, leaving me with no safety net if another unexpected crisis hit before my next paycheck. I just processed the weight of that financial stress when my parents rounded the hospital room doorway, my mother's eyes immediately flooding with tears the second she spotted my bandaged head. My mom rushed to my bedside, grabbing my uninjured hand tightly, her voice breaking with quiet sobs. Baby girl, what happened to you? We got a random call from the hospital outreach line this morning saying you've been admitted for a violent assault. We drove 2 hours straight to get here as fast as we could. I forced a weak, reassuring smile, trying to hide how severe the pain and fear still lingered in my chest. It's nothing serious, just a small cut and a mild concussion. I'm fully conscious. All scans came back clear. I'll be back on my feet in a couple weeks. My father shook his head softly, his own eyes glistening with suppressed worry. Don't lie to us. The nurse told us you screamed for your mom nonstop while coming out of anesthesia, crying about how scared and hurt you were that we know how bad this injury is. My mom buried her face in her hands and wept openly, every quiet sob twisting my heart into a tighter knot. I'd spent years hiding every hardship from my family to spare them stress. Overtime burnout, rising rent costs, loneliness living alone in a strange city, and this violent incident had shattered every layer of that carefully constructed pretense that I was fine on my own. For the first time since the assault, I let myself cry alongside her, letting all the terror and exhaustion of the last 24 hours spill out without holding back. The next morning, the hospital ward door swung open without warning, revealing Zhang Hongguang and Zhao Guifeng standing in the entryway, both dropping to their knees the second they locked eyes with me on the hospital bed. Their posturing shifted entirely from the violent, threatening couple who'd broken into my apartment the night before. Now they put on a display of remorse and desperation, clearly hoping to manipulate me into dropping all criminal charges. Zhao Guifeng crawled forward a few inches on her knees, her voice artificially soft and pleading. Miss Jiang, we're so sorry we lost our tempers yesterday. It was a terrible misunderstanding, and the mobile carrier already confirmed they'll process our full refund within 5 business days. If you agree to withdraw your police report, we'll bring you 2 home-raised free range hens to make healing soup for your head injury. They're far more nutritious than hospital food. Zhang Hongguang nodded beside her, mirroring her performative regret. We didn't mean to hurt you this badly. We just panicked over our life savings. Drop the charges, and we'll make this whole conflict disappear without any more trouble for either side. My parents stood from the visitor chairs beside my bed instantly, furious at the pair kneeling on the linoleum ward floor, and my dad's voice boomed loud enough to echo down the hospital hallway. You two tracked my daughter back to her private apartment, broke through her front door, beat her, and struck her in the head with a heavy pot, and you think a couple of chickens makes up for permanent scarring and a brain concussion? We will never let you sweep this under the rug. My mom crossed her arms, her tone sharp with protective rage. She works 60-plus hours every week just to afford a tiny apartment far from home, and you targeted her because you thought a young woman living alone wouldn't fight back against your harassment. We're not accepting any half-hearted apologies or meaningless gifts to let this crime slide. Zhao Guifeng's fake remorse vanished instantly, replaced by the same bitter resentment I'd heard over the phone the day prior. We got down on our knees to beg forgiveness, and you're still being unreasonable. How ungrateful can you be? I stared at Zhang Hongguang and Zhao Guifeng, their fleeting display of remorse melting away into impatience and entitlement, and every shred of sympathy I'd briefly considered feeling for their financial stress vanished completely. They'd chosen violence over a simple carrier refund process, tracked me to my private residence to assault me, and now expected me to erase all criminal liability just because they'd knelt on a hospital floor for 30 seconds. I'm not withdrawing any police reports, and I won't accept any half-baked settlement offers from you two, I told them flatly, my voice steady despite the lingering throb behind my stitches. This incident will move through the full criminal justice system exactly as the officers documented it. I have no intention of forgiving a violent home invasion and assault. Zhang Hongguang pulled Zhao Guifeng to her feet, his jaw tight with unspoken anger, and shot a venomous glare in my direction before storming out of the hospital room with his wife trailing behind him. My mom tugged my hand gently after they left, her tone heavy with quiet anxiety. We're not local residents here, baby. This couple lives nearby full-time, and we're only visiting temporarily. What if they retaliate against you again once we drive back home? Would you consider quitting your design job and moving back to our hometown with us? The pay's lower there, but you'd be safe living under our roof. I hesitated, torn between the comfort of my family's protection and the creative career I'd spent 4 years building in the city. My specialized industrial design studio role aligned perfectly with my college degree, and small hometown markets offered zero professional opportunities for my niche creative field. I opened my mouth to explain how much my job meant to me, but my dad cut me off before I could speak, placing a reassuring hand on my mother's shoulder. Our daughter gets to choose her own path in life. We can't shelter her from every conflict forever, and this isn't a reason to abandon everything she's worked hard to build. We'll stick around a few extra days to keep an eye on her until she's stable enough to recover alone. My mom nodded slowly, wiping a stray tear from her cheek, and I silently resolved to pursue every legal remedy available to ensure Zhang and Zhao faced full consequences for their actions, both for my own safety and to ease my parents' constant worry about future retaliation. 3 days into my hospital recovery stay, a full television mediation crew arrived at my ward unannounced, cameras rolling, microphones extended, Zhang Hongguang and Zhao Guifeng walking directly behind the lead mediator with somber, downtrodden expressions for the recording equipment. The mediator introduced themselves as staff from a popular local daytime conflict resolution show, explaining the couple had submitted a formal request to film an on-camera settlement session to resolve our civil dispute peacefully. I made my stance clear within the first 5 minutes of their arrival. I would not participate in any televised mediation, refused to compromise on pursuing criminal charges, and would not sign any agreement requiring me to waive financial damages or drop the police reports. The mediator spent 2 hours pushing me to accept a private out-of-court settlement, framing my refusal to negotiate as cruel and uncompassionate toward the couple's struggling household, but I held firm without wavering. When it became obvious, I would not cave to their pressure. The mediator's professional, polite demeanor faded into open irritation, and they wrapped up the filming session with a dismissive closing remark before leading the crew out of the ward. If you're unwilling to meet halfway for a peaceful resolution, there's nothing more we can do here. We wish you a smooth recovery from your injuries. As they filed out the door, I caught a subtle, self-satisfied smirk tugging at the corner of Zhang Hongguang's mouth, a tiny detail I brushed off as petty frustration at my refusal to settle at the time, an oversight I'd regret deeply within 24 hours. That evening, during primetime evening television hours, the mediation footage aired across the local network, and I quickly understood the meaning behind Zhang's quiet smirk. The production team had completely rearranged and chopped the raw footage to craft a heavily edited, one-sided narrative that painted me as a greedy, unfeeling villain hoarding a poor working family's life savings, while framing Zhang and Zhao as helpless victims wronged by a privileged young woman. All footage documenting their morning harassment, threatening phone calls, home invasion, and physical assault was cut entirely from the broadcast. The segments they kept only featured me refusing to hand over the 20,000 cash directly, paired with staged close-up shots of Zhao Guifang crying on camera and Zhang Hongguang slapping his own cheeks to manufacture remorse for the audience. Voiceover narration from the host framed every one of my reasonable requests to use the carrier's official refund system as deliberate excuses to steal their money. The second the episode finished airing, my phone blew up with hundreds of hateful anonymous messages, social media comments, and phone calls from viewers who'd only seen the edited broadcast. Strangers dug up my workplace's public contact information and flooded the design firm's front office with angry demands to fire me for moral corruption. Multiple upset viewers even showed up at our studio's customer exhibition space to stage small protests, yelling accusations of theft and cruelty to every client who walked through the doors. Our studio's customer revenue dropped by 30% in just 2 days as a direct result of the viral negative press. My supervisor pulled me aside once I was released from the hospital and cleared to return to work, regretfully delivering the company's official decision to terminate my employment with a standard N+1 severance package. The executive board can't sustain the massive client losses and reputational damage this viral controversy has caused the brand, he explained quietly, his tone heavy with sympathy. We know you're the wronged party in this conflict, but corporate leadership can't risk the entire team's livelihoods over a single employee's public scandal. I signed the termination paperwork without argument that afternoon, packing my design portfolio and personal desk supplies into a cardboard box as I processed the second devastating loss tied to the same phone payment mix-up. First a violent assault and hospital bills draining my savings. Now the career I'd spent years cultivating stripped away by manipulated television media and uninformed public backlash. As I sat on my empty apartment sofa that night, scrolling through endless social media posts bashing my character, I spotted a third critical plot twist hidden within the online hate. Dozens of commenters claimed to have located my full legal name, apartment address, and personal social media profiles, sharing edited, distorted photographs of my face and even digitally altered mock funeral images to harass me. The mediation shows selective editing hadn't just ruined my job, it had unleashed a wave of targeted doxing and cyber abuse threatening my personal safety all over again.